Friends, this is Jeff. We have two large announcements. First, we have moved the hub of our work to YouTube. We're going to continue posting our podcasts, same bat channel, same bat time. But as we enter year 5, TJ and I are going to be changing a lot of what we do. YouTube is going to give us the opportunity to not only do long-form discussions and interviews, but live question and answer shows, as well as we're going to be able to produce some short fare. As a bonus, for all of you who are interested, we just uploaded a brand new discussion with the Beth McCord, and that's on parenting, and it's on our YouTube channel right now. You can find the link to that in our show notes, or you can simply go to YouTube, search for Around the Circle, and you can see all of our recent videos and offerings. Second, and perhaps bigger, we are doing a significant amount of work with Patreon.com. Is a website many artists use to move their creative work. If you sign up on our Patreon page, you're going to get a bunch of goodies. First, you will be able to read the first 3 chapters of our upcoming book, which is entitled Around the Circle, an Enneagram book. Second, you're going to get the full versions of 9 type-specific interviews that we have had with the most informed people we know on their Enneagram type, and we are going to release those this fall. Moreover, we are going to, through Patreon, answer up to 3 questions a month for you personally or with a video related to Enneagram. We are not going to answer other questions. You're going to be able to listen to the audio version of Around the Circle on Patreon when it is released in 2025. And if you sign up before January, we will send you a signed copy of Around the Circle and a signed copy of the first edition of my first book, which is called 7, which you cannot find anywhere. That is the first edition. You can find the latter editions now. They're widespread. Just go to Amazon. But signed copy, first edition. Friends, we are very grateful for your support. Grateful you listen. And as always, may every good thing be yours. I'm Jeff Cook.
And I'm TJ Wilson.
And this is Around the Circle.
I'm walking slowly, I'm taking my time. All I could talking is starting to rhyme. I'm letting go of lonely, letting go of strife. I just can't get enough of this beautiful life.
4s, mature 4s. I got original and sensitive and cultured front of mind, but what goes through y'all's mind here?
Depth, bringing out depth, getting past the surface to why are we really here? I feel like 4s arrive on the planet feeling like they need to discover their purpose. And so nothing is wasted in their journey for that. And when you are working with or living with or on a team with a 4, it's we all have a purpose. Let's find it and then let's live it.
Yeah,
it's so cool. It's inspiring in a different way.
I live and operate in the service industry, but like social interactions carry some amount of small talk with them, and 4s don't want the small talk. And so like it is really, really easy for a lot of us to just navigate our lives sort of being fake everywhere. Like, hey, how are you today? I'm doing great. The person asking the question didn't actually care about the answer, and the person giving the answer is not being truthful, right? That is how most of our conversations start. Hey, how are you? What's up? Like all of those things, that is how most of our interactions start. And 4s really want to skip all that nonsense and get to the truth about what's actually going on. And if you're having a bad day, 4s want to know about it. If you're having a great day, 4s want to know about it because they want the truth and the fullness of the truth. Because why are we even bothering with all this small talk nonsense? Because there's something so much better about being fully truthful.
I generally hate and love working with 4s because they're the only ones that have the same standards that I do, and they often even push past them. But here's the problem. I'm the one that executes. They're not going to execute that, create that thing. So they give me the feedback at really insightful levels. And it's just like, oh, you're right. This is, a better, more beautiful way of doing this. And yet leave me to execute on my own.
I think as we journey into this 4-5 space at the bottom of the Enneagram, it's important to look at, these are the only two spaces where they don't have access to all three stances. Mm-hmm. And so 4s are withdrawing, 5s are withdrawing. 4s, their lines are to 1 and 2. So they're the only type who has no line to 3, 7, or 8. There's no connection to independence, making them the one type who it's kind of impossible for them to stand independent from something. And where we get the gift of that superpower is when they're not being withdrawn, they're being responsive in some very authentic, real ways. And that's a superpower.
Yeah, that's very well said. Seems mundane, and I don't mean to make it mundane, especially when we come to the 4s, but the creativity needs to be elevated. The sensitivity.
I want to split a hair a little bit with the word creativity and acknowledge that, like, one of the most important things about art is not creation, but is in fact the unveiling of the ability of good art to take the viewer, listener, receiver, audience into the mind of the creator. It's not just about the creation. It's about showing other people something true.
Authenticity.
Yeah.
It just rings in my head. It's authentic. Creative, yes, maybe, but it's real. It's not surface.
Right.
When 4s pull me into their artistic work, it's gonna take 5 hours sometimes. Like, this is the impression I have going in. It's like they will do all of that background, and then when it's time to unveil the thing and draw you in, it's almost like, okay, we need to have a little bit of space, a little bit of room and time so that the full experience can be had.
In the waiting, there's something in the waiting, in that they don't need the instant gratification, in the build to it. Right. That's cool.
The build to it is exactly right. On the
savoring, it's an element. There's an element of, don't just experience something, savor something, like really get in it.
Yeah.
They slow us down. I mean, the two things for working, because I worked very closely with a 4 for 15 years, and we were both in an administrative capacity at a school we were had built and were administrators for, and when I was too caught up in my task focus, it's like I knew the president would send him. The president would send the 4. I'm certain the president was an 8. So I aligned with him most of the time. But when in his wisdom, he needed me to slow down and kind of consider how I was landing on others.
Yes.
That's when David would be in my office, with his, it's like they recenter us in an important way. Like, what's the real point of what we're doing?
Yeah. I don't know if this counts, and this may be true of 9s as well, but I know so many 4s who are smokers, and it's part of that is that we're going to go over here, and it requires us to actually pause for a minute. So, like, I have a 4 in my life who the only thing he does is has a tobacco group, and it's like, we're going to sit with this cigar and
recenter
the savoring. Yeah.
There is an element, I know we brought it up with other numbers, but there's a real element to 4s meeting you where you are.
Yeah, talk about that.
I think it's part of the authenticity. I think it's part of the genuineness, like My radar as an 8 for inauthenticity is strong. I think arguably the only number for whom it's stronger is a 4. And if you're inauthentic on my radar as an 8, more often than not, I'm going to dismiss you.
Mm-hmm.
A 4 is going to try to understand it.
Yeah.
And that's a real gift.
Last thing I have on 4s is just leadership has that they're idealists, so they're pulling you into something. And we've kind of spoken around this. Not often the case that they're like the entrepreneur on the front lines doing the thing. They're going to pull you into something, and it may be, I don't think that it's commonly, leadership from the front. It's often leadership from the side in the midst of the body. And it may be even the antagonistic, what would you call that? The contrarian space, but it often can be incredibly valuable in terms of the leadership that's offered in that space.
I think what they unconsciously require from us in leadership spaces is that we bring our best selves. And best doesn't mean winning. Best means authentic.
Yes.
Like we each have a gift. We each have something to bring to the table. Don't try to bring someone else's gift. What you bring matters. So bring that.
Present. Yeah.
You're spinning it as the 4s at their best are more complementary and not like, I'm going to take the steering wheel and go over here.
Correct.
That's interesting. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, that's like one of the big things that I recognize in a lot of the 4s that I know is that there's not a need to fix things, even the stuff that they are talking about. Like even the stuff that they bring that they need other people's input on, it's not a need to fix something. It's need to feel a certain way about a lot of things. And it's not even really a need to feel a certain way. It's wanting to like feel right is the wrong word. Authentic, to feel what one feels in this space. And so like we talk about this when we talk about 4s with grief. We talk about like there's just so many spaces where 4s are providing an opportunity for people to be exactly as they are without a need to fix it. And so many of us can't sit in those places because we feel like we're supposed to fix it. So many of us can't sit in those spaces because we're already moving to try and fix it. There's just especially in our culture, there's just such an element of not allowing things to remain if we think they can be fixed, right? And 4s don't necessarily need that. They don't need to fix the things.
It's acknowledging brokenness.
Yeah. And there can be beauty in brokenness.
Oh yeah. Every crack and chip and it is beautiful. It's not because it's real.
Right.
There can even be forward movement through acknowledging the brokenness, which oftentimes those on the front have a very, very, very difficult time doing.
Yeah.
Got to take a few steps back in order to understand what's going on, and then we can proceed. Bang. 5s. What does a mature 5 look like?
I want to start with this one because hands down in my career, the best leader for me, and I believe for 8s, is a 5. I mean, he was very impactful because you've got all that neutrality, all that objectivity. And when I was getting swept away with a reaction that was usually emotional and usually angry, he didn't take it personally.
Yeah.
He stayed neutral. He stayed objective. And it's like he let me fly without, but he tempered me. And that's 5s have a way like 9s do of just tempering, of bringing things to an even keel. That's they just do it by the way they process and move, and it's cool.
Yeah, not in general, not really wanting to be like put their thumb on the scale in any way, and like they wanting to be observers of the things that are happening around them, they can more easily carry that like not wanting to put your finger on the scale. They don't need to change your mind. They don't need to, and they don't care when you're mad, because they recognize that you're not mad at them, and even if you are, it probably isn't about the 5. It's about you, and they kind of don't care, right? And like the ability to be observant of your emotions, and not letting feeling them dictate how you move and see the world, means that they can have more stable and less reactive positions. Like that ability to not have to react to things that are happening in front of you is unheard of to many other types.
And still take it in.
Yeah.
I think 9s, I think TJ, you can look like you're occupying that space too, but it's really more of your drive to be unaffected by life.
Yep.
5s observe it, take it in, and they acknowledged it and still didn't. It's like I picked it up and it still didn't cause me to move one way or another. And so the acknowledgement is something 5s bring to the table that I don't think 9s do.
Yeah. The thing I appreciate most about 5s, I have 2s, 3s, and 4s in my life who understand who I am, but there's a high relational focus there. 9s understand who I am, but there's a different kind of motive there. When I get a compliment from a 5, this is gold for me. This is one of the few places where I'm like, this person understands me, sees what I'm doing, is able to articulate with worthy language. Then like I'll hold that as a treasure, because they don't have the relational motive isn't there.
Well, they're incapable of fluff.
Yeah.
Literally, they're incapable of it.
There it is.
I mean, that's where they're the one type, the only type who has no line to 1, 2, or 6. So that responsiveness. So when they're telling you, you can take it because they're telling it like it is. And there's no other motivation than just relating it like it is. I think that's well said.
On top of that, just the maturity that I see in 5s, there is a strong inventiveness that can be in place in some 5s. There's obviously 5s that transcend knowledge and hit that space we would call wisdom. That person is a treasure. And I don't think that 5s get pegged with the idea of being energetic, but there's an energy that 5s can have when mature, when acting on their knowledge, that is a true, again, like kind of treasure to the rest of us.
When I talk about the shared self-confidence of the assertive or independent stance, the 3s, 7s, and 8s, in my mind, I always think, man, 5s are right behind us.
Yeah.
Probably because if they're not withdrawn, their only 2 options are 7 or 8, right? So there's going to be this independence that comes out. But when you join that with a large amount of logic and objective reason, naturally, and no relational tie for anyone else needing to see it your way,
right?
It's like they kind of silently hold a standard for others, so that if you even want the 5 to even see you or consider you, you have to have on board some logic and objective reason. And so it's like they require it from us without telling us.
Yeah.
Like, slow down, think it through. It's interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of other types, I think, like a lot of us will look at that and see arrogance. And I think like healthy 5s, the amazing thing is it's not at all arrogant. They're not attached to it in the way that that is required for arrogance. And so they can have those kinds of high standards, and it's just there. It's not because they're jerks or they think they're better than everyone. It's just like, this is the way things should be. And yeah, the way that fives can exist in that place where they are smarter than everyone, but it's not arrogance, is in the same way that eights have a level of like not seeming self-centered, but they're not actually self-centered. Fives can seem arrogant, but it's not arrogance. It's this great detachment from the information that you carry.
I'm so glad you brought fives and eights together in that sense, because as you just started talking, I've always believed, and when I'm teaching in corporate spaces, I mention it, fives and eights uniquely are the only two types who don't bring any combination of responsiveness or emotion to work.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're the only two. Everyone else is bringing one or the other or both.
Right.
And so I actually think we're the most misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
A, because we're not bringing that, but B, because we don't need to tell you what we're thinking.
Yep.
And everybody else does. And when you don't know what an 8 or 5 is thinking, and we don't feel motivated to tell you, man, the stuff people make up is fascinating. It is fascinating.
But to the 8 and 5's credit, it also means that they can get a lot more done with all of us being distracted by this nonsense.
Right.
Yeah.
Lucky for me, I have a 5 and an 8 who live in my basement. I don't know what the hell they're thinking on this front. Makes it very difficult to be a reactive parent.
Very difficult.
The things that go through my mind, twofold, are the elevation of assets and memory. There are some traditions, I want to make this religious for a second, that really elevate memory and remember what has happened, and I'd use that as an illustration for what I really value in fives, that they will, the pausing and the reminder of the inventory of the past is something that they easily access, as well as here are the assets we have. Here are the large inventory of places that bring us stability, security that we can employ for our benefit. Those two things are incredibly valuable, especially for somebody like me who's reactive and kind of often living on the edge and on the front line. And I'm just forgetting what I have, because it's all about forward movement, accomplishing the thing. And fives, and when I work with fives or am in relationship with fives, those can be just incredible treasures for me experience.
I'd weave TJ in with this one, because when you say that, Jeff, what I think about is the similarities of fives and nines, because they're the withdrawing types whose orientation of time is the past.
Yep.
Four's orientation of time in the past is all wrapped into people and their connections to feelings and people. Fives and nines, it's more objective, where I think fives almost elevate above nines in that sense, especially in a working environment, is nines know the lesson from the past, but are still going to see it from where you're standing right now. Fives learned the lesson in the past and can just stand with the lesson and not deviate from, this is what we should have learned from the past.
This is why fives, kind of across the board, but especially mature, don't suffer fools. And it's so enjoyable to watch fives step away from people who they know are foolish. For me, I don't know they're foolish yet, but they know they're foolish and they're moving on.
There you go.
They are protective of their energy. This person will be dismissed at this moment, and we're moving here. And I grab hold of that person by the hand. It's one of the few times that I'm like, I should probably stand with this person, because I will end up getting in trouble.
Because they're bringing the logic and spades that I need.
Yeah, that's it. And that's it. I'm absolutely outsourcing my thinking at that point in time.
Yeah.
Well, and they can present that logic in a way that is, again, unattached to the results. Like there's the non-emotional, like the desire to remain unattached for fives. Like it also means that when they need to assert leadership, when they need to like say, hey, this is the lesson that we should have learned from that thing that happened 5 years ago. Unlike some other types who are, gifted at saying we need to do this, if everyone else disagrees with the 5, they'll be like, okay, your funeral. Like there isn't an emotional attachment to other people agreeing, other people going along with it. It doesn't come from a place of subjective response. And
that neutrality carries forward in
Mhm.
so many important ways. Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed.
One thing that was mentioned, and it's more of a footnote, but it applies to all the types. It was something that, Joey, that you said early on, was that the best leaders that you had been 5s. And it's worth noting as we talk through the strengths that relationships on the line can really matter, especially when we have the privilege of having leaders who are our stress number. Because so often when we're in a work environment or family environment and we fall into places that are stressful, it is just a treasure to find that there is somebody with more maturity, more wisdom, more experience who lives in our stress number and has, all the virtues and attributes at the high side to offer us in that space. And I suppose that's what I heard as you were saying that.
Absolutely. I love that. Like I know, because I know Enneagram and because I want to be a healthier, more balanced person, I know the very thing I need. We forget, I think, that our stress number, we actually need the behaviors of our stress number to take care of us, to be a more balanced human being. And I cannot draw authentically from 2 as an 8 if I don't stop and shut my mouth and observe and let go of emotion and intensity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I love that, Jeff. That's a huge observation that I think it's like they show us how to draw from that high side, right? All the possibilities that are there.
And they do it in the way that 8s need it. Like this, we could do this, I think, all around the circle and find like one other type that like this one other type is going to do something for each type that anyway, the unattached to the relational aspect, like I know so many 8s, and granted some of them are very unhealthy, but I know so many 8s who the moment you bring emotions into the discussion, now we're talking about something different and we're not on the subject we need to be talking about anymore. And I don't have time for emotions because we have this task that we need to accomplish, and the emotions we can deal with later. And also I don't want to be a part of that conversation because I don't care about your emotions. And 5s, like, coming into these spaces with 8s, 5s don't have any of that baggage. 5s don't have the need to bring up the emotions. Like, it's all about the information. And so as a leader for 8s in particular, man, 8s can feel, I'm certain that there is just like there's a relief that 8s can feel in the presence of a 5 leader, because you're never going to bring up the emotional aspects of the things that we're actually trying to accomplish.
And you're not going to be influenced by everyone else's emotions about the 8.
Yep.
I wrote about 5s in my book.
Yes.
And one of the things I said about my boss was, I cannot imagine how many people he received who had an issue with me, and it was all emotional, and he and in his way backed me up.
Yep. Yeah. And for a minute, someone else was acting as the shield that you have spent your whole life learning how to carry, and you could just be yourself instead of holding this shield. Yeah. Look at that amazing thing that 5s can do.
Yeah.
Holy cow, that's a big deal for 8s.
Last thing I wanted to say on leadership is that oftentimes we associate, especially in American culture, leadership with higher, faster, bigger. And sometimes leadership means we're pausing and we're living here for a while, and that's the best possible move that we can make. And there's something about fives in terms of the grounded wisdom. Like some people in leadership culture world can call other big personalities anchors, as though they're keeping the organization back from achieving, maximum, efficiency of profit and the rest. Sometimes you have something that really is strong, stable, and works. And one ought to think about risk. One ought to think about the employees and their welfare. One ought to think about stability. One ought to think about all the future potential dangers that are out there. And sometimes having the voice say, now is the time to hold. And you know what? When the five feels secure, they will naturally move into 8 space and get moving perhaps. But that 5 ability to can be content can be very valuable in leadership spaces.
I will say, since you brought up that move to 8 when they're ready to do, I don't know if I've said this yet. The language that was always handed to me as I was learning Enneagram was, there's more 6s than any other type. Like that was just like a blanket statement. Half the world are 6s. I haven't found that to be true. What I have found to be true, like trackable with companies, I've been with one company where I'm going on 7 years and they're tracking this, is that there's more 6s and more 9s than any other type. And there's fewer 4s, we know that, but fewer 8s, fewer 4s and 8s than any other type. And I, as you can imagine, don't come across a lot of people who misidentify as 4. I have worked with multiple of every single type on the Enneagram who misidentifies as 8. And in a workspace, in a corporate environment, the type that misidentifies the most are 5s misidentifying as 8s. It's a real thing. And it's because the way I say it is, you could, if you lined up 100 people who didn't like their job and knew their Enneagram number, I don't think you'd have many 5s in there, because 5s know that most jobs require being around others. That's the very thing that they anticipate draining energy. So they find spaces to occupy that they're comfortable in and secure in. And they show up very much like an 8 when they're in that doing space.
We spoke with a friend of ours who's a 5 who does a lot of inner work because she's a PhD student in psychology. One of the things that came out in our conversation was that she's living in her head when she's centered as a 5. And she's living in her head when she moves into her stress number. The only place she feels secure is if she can engage her body. And so a lot of her activities, a lot of the things that she was saying, this is, the places I feel comfortable, ended up being very physical in orientation. And that's, I suppose, what I hear there, especially if somebody is a 5 and they consciously choose to enter a corporate environment. That means that they're probably more socially oriented and may have that instinct.
I will say, if I'm going to say where I think the confusion comes, 8s, I think 8s motivating need to be against. 5s confuse that with their just ingrained desire to be contrarian.
Yeah. That's a good word.
And that's my word for 5s. And so I now teach, and I say 8s need to be against does not mean we're going to argue with you or debate. If you've got someone who wants to argue and debate, we see it in Enneagram and parenting all the time. You're not dealing with an 8. You are more likely dealing with a 5 because of that. And that contrarian piece can be a superpower when it's channeled the right way.
Part of that, as a father of a 5, part of that is the 5 wants you to love them. And part of loving them means thinking that they're smart. And they'll push into those spaces because that's actually a space where if you affirm them in that realm, they feel it.
And that's where they can relate. That's a comfortable relating space. Like, let's not do small talk, but if we can debate, I'll have energy for that because it's an exchange of knowledge and ideas. And I think they get an energy from that quite frankly, where's this 8 out? So
And it also speaks like the idea of the contrarian nature. Like you 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 don't learn anything if everything is fine. Like you don't grow without some type of instigating issue that has to be addressed. Like I think about the ending of the series A Good Place, where they finally make it to the sort of like the actual good place, the heaven, and everyone is like a mindless blob of boring, because when you have all of your needs fulfilled and you can get anything you want at any time and you can access any knowledge and you can go anywhere at any time, then like there's nothing to anchor to. There's nothing that it doesn't mean anything anymore. And for fives, like that idea of even potentially just like shoring up my position on a certain aspect or within a debate, gathering all of the ways that might, like figuring out all the holes in your logic, like all of that, gaining more information about something that you're even sure of is only going to make you better.
Yep.
And like that, it's energizing for fives because you're getting more. You're shoring up your defenses. You're filling your coffers more with something that is what you desire.
And I think from a leadership standpoint, where fives stand out for all those reasons that you just mentioned, TJ, is they have a way of elevating our thinking, because they're not tied to whether we do it or not. You don't get the pressure that you have to, but if you want to meet a 5 in their space, you have to elevate your objective reason, or you can't meet them there.
Right.
Good call. We'll land with the 6s. What do mature 6s look like?
When I teach 6s in corporate America, I spend time in their 3 monikers, the 3 most common ones. I say, devil's advocate and loyalist, that's their home base. That's where thinking is. But true team player is the move they make to process with feeling and people awareness and subjectivity. And that is a superpower. If the 6s, we say 2s need people. And I almost think that's misleading, because I think 2s need a person. And as long as they have a person, regardless of subtype, a person is what 2 needs. 6s need people. And we don't give that enough airtime because their home base is thinking, but they don't stay there. And when you need people to feel secure, you build community regardless of where you are. And that is a superpower.
Yeah.
That's been the most helpful side of your work on processing center for me, has been around 6s on exactly this front. This was a huge door in terms of, I didn't realize how relational 6s were, but you make that move and say they are processing everything, and that's the target through their relational center, and it ends up being just it opens up that door for me, and it comes into their maturation as well. That means that mature 6s are probably going to be very astute in how relationships work, function, and what their roles are in them, and they're going to have moved beyond codependency, and maturity is going to look different. I think codependency is a big idea for me as I think about 6s being average to unhealthy, and what does it look like to transcend that? It ends up being the maturity move.
I think there's something important that every other type doesn't love, to 6s needing to know the why.
Yeah.
And asking questions to get to the why. Because I think most of us move without considering the why. And it's laborious and annoying sometimes when 6s are hitting you with all the questions. But man, that's important. I had a 6 say, who one time in a company I was working with, she was the HR director for an 8. And first of all, the company slogan was living on the edge of chaos. That was really hard for her as a 6. But what she said was, he's the gas and I'm the brakes. And we know that about ourselves, and this company benefits because he's the gas, and this company benefits because I'm the brakes.
And by the way, no vehicle ever is fully functional without gas and brakes. Yeah.
Real similar to 5s here in terms of 6s having in a social environment, especially a corporate environment, having an identity is kind of an anchor. You're pulling back progress because we have these great visions and we want to spend $100 million on this next big thing. And the 6 says, okay, so that's a lot of money. Perhaps we should think through this. And no, but you're an anchor to our visions and dreams. And, there is an angle on leadership there. It's like, no, pause and think through. I suppose this is where the devil's advocate comes in, but also I'm a team player and I'm loyal, and that's why I'm bringing up.
I had one president recently say in a room of his employees that he knows when there's a big decision to be made, he knows once he has the 6s on board, he can move forward. Like it's every angle has been considered.
I had knocked being codependent on one front, but on a flip side, perhaps the positive is the 6 is actually creating community, and that can be really valuable for the rest of us, especially for somebody like myself who would prefer to isolate most of the time. And what were your thoughts?
Well, when TJ was saying earlier, when people, so many of us, most of us, when we say, how are you doing? It's, I'm fine. And the request, the solicitation for information wasn't genuine, and the information wasn't truthful. Right. Not so with 6s. Okay. Like one of the best spaces to see someone who values information, whose home base is head, right? And logic and analysis. They want it. They value information. So when a 6 asks you how you're doing, they want the information, and that's how they feel connected to you. And what an interesting way to build community without realizing you're building community, right?
I've really wanted to talk about this, and this may be a footnote, but we had brought up authenticity with 4s and 8s. And if you add the 6 on this front, it makes a lot of sense, especially if you note the 4, 8s and 6s move into the desire for authenticity when they're solving problems. And the problem is never where are we going. The problem is who is on my team. The problem is who understands me. The problem is, does this person feel the way that I do? And that's the authenticity. There's something to be said about authenticity in that realm, it seems to me, which I haven't thought through.
Well, you can't just tell a 6, I'm fine, right?
Right.
Why are you fine? What's going well? Or I'm not great. Why are you not great?
It's also interesting that 8s require authenticity in the way that like a holistic authenticity, and 4s require an emotional authenticity, and 6s require an intellectual authenticity.
Yep, definitely.
That's a great point.
Just interesting.
I love that. That's a great point. Say more about the 8 then. I want to, because I get 4 and 6.
It to me it's a reconciliation of the inner life with the outer life.
Say what you mean and mean what you say.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
And you don't bother telling me something if you're going to do something different. Like that the way you conceive of yourself on the inside should reflect the way you behave on the outside.
That's it. That's what, very well said.
And it's almost ineffable because it's intuitional, body-centered, almost ineffable kind of idea.
I like that.
Them bringing up the why, something that you had brought up in a previous podcast that really stuck with me was how reactive types, 1s, 2s, and 6s control situations through questions. And that was what hit me here in terms of what may actually be taking place for the 6 is finding some stability, but they're finding stability in the questions that they're asking. On a healthy side, on a mature side, that takes on a different face, it seems to me. I'm trying to think of who that person is. When the mature 6 is asking really probing questions, why are you feeling that way? What does that look like when they're very healthy?
My mom says that an honest question is one that you're asking because you really don't know the answer to.
Mm-hmm.
And 6s seem to embody that because they're always on this search for information, and because it's going to guide them to feel secure, maybe even in their connection to you, in a business environment, so that they can support you in the direction you're going. I do think there's something to it on that level, Jeff, where on the mature side, they're really honest questions. I
Right.
think on the less healthy side, 6s are outwardly the most obviously controlling number. True. I think 1s can lean into micromanagement.
Yeah.
But I think 6s are the most controlling number. But I think part of that control is being wired to consider everyone and everything when they're making a decision. And they're the only ones who do that.
And I think it's like thinking about that fun, like on one side, like on the unhealthy side, this behavior motivate, like all of it is somewhat about control, right? And I think on the healthiest side of that, I think it is in fact so much the opposite of control, because like the rest of us don't need to ask why, because we're all kind of assuming a little bit or a lot of it. Like we don't need to ask why because we assume we already know the answer. 6s don't, and when they are healthy, it is a full lack of wanting to assert control in asking why, because it's not about control, it's about understanding.
I love that. I think that's well said. I would offer that it's the reflective of the secure move from to 9, right?
Do what you want, but you have to know that. Yeah.
They're trying to push into 9 space.
When they're more mature, absolutely.
Yeah, one of my favorite lines from a TV show ever, it's regularly running through my head, is do whatever you want, you just have to know what that is. And I think the 9 space is the do whatever you want. The 6 is like you have to know what that is. And part of what 6s bring to the world is they are going to ask the questions that a lot of the rest of us don't think to ask.
I was thinking preparedness is what comes to my mind over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And when you have a mature 6, you aren't exposed to the radar. You're just exposed to the preparedness. And that's really is a superpower, right? Like to follow a mature 6 in leadership, they've considered everything without putting that on you. And so you're free to do what it's almost like you go back to what 4s and 8s kind of bring out of you is you are then they're creating the space for you to bring what you bring and do that well, because they've kind of ushered you into that space, if that makes sense.
There's so much time and energy and attention paid to the thing itself that we forget how important the preparation is for the thing. And I think in particular 6s struggle with reconciling that, like the preparation serves the thing. And so like the point I'm trying to get to is that the idea that 6s so frequently behave in the world in ways that they don't see themselves doing prior to experiencing it. Another way to say that, like they so often find themselves executing something that they didn't think they were capable of because they are fully capable, and all of it because that preparation comes beforehand. Their strength to the capability that they carry around is they can't see it, but man, that preparation, like all of that work beforehand is so, like, they have done so much work beforehand that they don't even recognize how capable they are when they're doing it.
It's a strange space to be in for as I'm envisioning this. They have a future focus, like here are the problems that may emerge, and they're going to react in the present to that,
Right.
and then forget all the things that they have perhaps done in reaction to future problems, and so there lies anxiety, as it were.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong there. Is it the case that sixes remember that they've done some preparation? Or is it constantly, I need to consistently do preparation even when I've already prepared?
What hit me about what you're asking, connected to what TJ walked us through just now, is sixes don't believe they're ready because of the self-doubt, but they live in the hamster wheel in their mind of paralysis by analysis. So they don't ever think they're ready. And yet when the reaction is needed, they're ready because they've thought through it in every different way.
Yeah. And so much so that they won't even claim credit for how ready they were and like how successfully they got through the thing, because they're still doubting themselves. They don't even recognize that they did it and did it well.
Is it the case that, okay, they developed the muscles over the last 10 years? You know, they've been reactive to future threats. So they have the muscles such that, you know, they may not remember what their prep was that's already lying in wait, but the problem hits and they're like, oh yeah, I've already done this. And the muscle memory kicks in and you react to the problem that's real. You know what I mean there?
I do. I think I don't think any of us anywhere give enough airtime to the delineation between a phobic leaning six and a counterphobic leaning six. And I think this is one of the ways we can give that delineation. The way I see it is all sixes are on that spectrum of, you know, depending on the situation, they'll lean phobic or they'll lean counterphobic. They'll forge ahead or they'll fall back. And I see counterphobic sixes having that confidence, it looks like, that eights have, because they're mobilizing past doubt faster. And so I do think this is a space where you need to acknowledge the phobic or the counterphobic lean. A phobic six is not going to believe that they're prepared. A counterphobic six almost justifiably to themselves need to know they have that in them, I guess. Does that make sense?
It does. Of all things, and I don't know if this is sixes in particular, whenever I start speaking about sixes or theorizing about sixes, like my inability, the inability of sixes to understand themselves, it's like it washes over me. And I'm like, I don't think I understand sixes either. So, but
what's really going on there?
Yeah, what is up with y'all?
I do think it's interesting that you talked about the fact that you don't have twos and sixes in your life. I think that feeds a natural disconnect, because for ones, twos, and sixes in the responsive stance, you're the only one processing with action. Twos and sixes are processing with people and relationships. They're reading the environment in a different way that you are. Same with fours. We already talked about fours being different from fives and nines, and we didn't say much about it, but that's the clear delineation with sevens and threes and eights. Threes and eights are both processing with action. Sevens are not. I'm newly intrigued now that they all are connected. The outliers in every stance, 1, 4, and 7, y'all are all interconnected. I don't know where I'm going with that, but that's just kind of interesting.
Well, they would be the idealists if you put it,
yeah.
My answer to your question about time, though, is like I think that sixes, more than any other type, are resistant to the past. it's almost like a rejection of the past. Like they combine that like doubt of self and future focus, and the past, whatever happened in the past isn't what's going to happen in the future. It's always going to be different because no two things are exactly the same. And whatever happened in the past, you can't trust that to be, because these circumstances are going to be different. And
I like resistance in terms of our intelligence there, that we're resistant, heart triad resistant to the past and head triad resistant to the future. I feel like sixes like can't engage the past, not that they're like rejecting. I suppose that would be my gut.
The way I see it is sixes are working with that. They're the only ones working with that combination of they're fueled by anticipation, like fives and sevens, but they're ruled by the present.
Yeah.
So fives are fueled by anticipation, but orientation of time is the past. Sevens are fueled by anticipation that goes hand in hand with a future orientation.
Mm-hmm.
Sixes are that weird combo of I am absolutely motivated by unforeseen possible future events, and yet I cannot ignore what's happening right in front of me. And there's just no room to look behind you if you're already in that space.
I think that's where my mind goes also, is that it can't be overstated, the 1, 2, and 6, how present everything is in terms of their engagement.
Tethered is my language. I feel like you're all tethered to the present because of the external reference point.
Yeah. It's almost like nothing else matters for me. It's so easy to block out the future and past for me. Last word on sixes and their leadership and gifts.
And to me, thank God we have them.
Yep.
Like there's so many ways that so many of us would just forge a path ahead, and like heading in the wrong direction through a bunch of like thistles that are on fire somehow, and like there's just, we do not do a good job of looking out for the danger in front of us, and sixes like hold that space, and because they are the team player, they're not doing it just for you. They're not doing it just for them. The reason that they are concerned about the future is because it's the best for everyone. And it's, man, thank God they're around.
I would only build on that in that that's how I introduce that responsive stance, ones, twos, and sixes. I say, I find it to be half the world. That's where I'm happy with saying half the world is ones, twos, and sixes, because it's half of every organization I work with, no matter what. And thank God that we have half the world paying attention to and being motivated to respond to what's happening outside of all of us, feeling responsible. And ones do it. I think ones can get caught up in perfection. And I think twos can get caught up in the relationship. And I don't think sixes come with that baggage.
Right.
It's a good word. This is an excellent place to land. Hey, guess what? If you are in the year 2025, which is down the timeline for us, there is a fantastic book. I've read it. I give it 5 stars. Just amazing. My blurb is on the back in big, bold letters. Jeff Cook, that's me. And it's by the Joey Schewee. Do you have a name for your book?
Working title that I'm not tied to, but it just, I don't know. I like it, is How Did We Get Here?
Oh, I love that. That's it. I love titles of books that are questions.
Yeah.
That's well.
Because I feel like people who are going to pick it up, it's after they're asking that question.
Well, if you're in the year 2031, TJ and I's book is out there as well. So well worth finding.
And you could probably find 2 or 3 others by Joey out there as well.
By 2031.
Yeah.
And this will all be through the YouTube channel by 2031.
I mean,
Right,
we
exactly.
have a very successful YouTube channel, and whatever the new widget is that you download.
You'll get the AI versions of all 3 of us.
That's right. Our AI avatar counselors are out there to download.
Have I? I don't think I have. I'll find a way to just get it in an email to you two. The guy the 4 who designed my website, is really into AI and coding and all this stuff. And he sent me a blurb of a video, that I did, interview that I did. And the blurb is me talking, y'all. And it is in perfect Spanish. And it is my voice and my words. And it is freaky. I don't like it. You know me. I'm like, I can't go there, Cody. I can't. He's like, we could bring this to some, and I'm like, I don't know. So
I would love to see that. I would think to myself, I'm way more attractive speaking French than I am with my Midwest English.
And I, of course, don't speak Spanish, so I had to ask my dad. I'm like, my dad's like, it's great Spanish. It's very
Perfect.
Friends, as always, it would mean the world to us if you shared this with somebody you love, preferably somebody who just needs some love and reminders of how amazing they are. This is for them. Intro music is by The Collection, who TJ Wilson is breaking up. They're on their last
They
tour
are?
and going separate ways. So much love to our friends in The Collection. And that's the intro music. Outro is by Brian Claxton. And if you get into our stuff, you can find more on aroundthecircle.org, or we are presently doing a ton of stuff with Patreon and YouTube, which you should find. And as always, you can find the great Joey Schewee at
WeSolutions.life.
fantastic hub for doing consulting, both personally and corporate, all the things. That's what I got. You got anything else? TJ?
I got nothing, man.
He's TJ Wilson. He's officially awesome. She's Joey Schewee. She's a treasure to us. I'm Jeff Cook, and who you aren't just isn't interesting.
I love it, guys. We're changing the world. I believe it.